Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland and you are very welcome to the channel. Now it's the end of January, a very exciting time for all of us who have masses and masses of seeds to sow. But even if you only are planning on sowing a few, then it's time to get ready for sowing seeds. And today I'm going to bring you through what you need to do to be all set up and ready. And we'll even make our own seed potting mix. So let's get on with the video. It can be really difficult at this time of year because if you're anything like me, you're just chomping at the bit. You just want to get on with it and start sowing those seeds and see those seedlings sprout and let it just auger in spring. But it really is too early to start yet. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to hear that, but I would say that if you have an indoor situation or if you have heated propagators and lighting, then you could actually start early. But for me, that's too much of a big palaver. It means you have to nurse those seedlings for longer and stop them kind of falling over because they've been brought into existence too early in the year. So at this stage in the game, what I'm doing here in my greenhouse is just making sure I have everything prepped and just ready to go for when I start seed sowing. And that will probably be in February. Now, February might be a bit early for some people, but for me, that's when I'm going to start off with my hardy annual seeds. Okay, so what do you need to do? And I guess the first thing that you need to do is to get your seed trays ready. So now's the time to check your seed trays and seed pots and decide what you're going to use when you start sowing those seeds. Wash anything that you're going to use and discard anything that's broken. Now I have a couple of examples to show you here. And here's what I use. Now I have a seed tray here and this I will use for annuals, chiefly for annuals. And with each cell I will sow 3 seeds. 3 is a good number as far as I'm concerned. If all of them germinate, then I might decide to just pull out and discard 2. But if I have time and space, then what I'll do is remove the extra 2 and plant them in a different cell, an empty cell. So I find these trays so good for annuals. For anything that has very, very fine seed, I use these trays that don't have individual cells. They have holes at the base, just like the other one, but it's just easier to broadcast seed in something like this. And you can have half ones as well, which are just easier if you don't want to sow a lot of the same type of seed. Also, for perennials, what I use is a regular pot. This is a small sized pot, but it has a deep root run. And with perennials, what I'll do is broadcast my seed on the surface of the compost or potting mix, as they say in the States, and just wait until they germinate. And I leave them undisturbed for a longer period of time. And that's okay because they have a deeper root run and they can get everything that they need from the soil. So these 3 are my go-to for all types of seed sowing. And the second thing you need to do now is to clean up your labels. Now don't get me started on labels. Grr, I went through a whole journey with different types of labels last winter. I won't go into it now. But if you have reusable labels like this that you write on with pencil, now is a good time to take them to the sink, get some soapy water and scrub them so you have nice clean labels to label your plants with. Also, check that any equipment you use is in good working order. So heated propagators, if you use them, check that they still work. Or if you have the kind of coil that goes into the sand in a purpose-built bed in your greenhouse, also switch that on, make sure it's working. Because you don't want to be surprised when you set aside time to sow your seeds and suddenly find that you can't do it because such and such a thing has decided to pack it in just right now. And the next thing you need to do is to make sure that you have all of the potting mixes that you need for sowing your seed. And in just a few moments I'll show you how I make up my potting mix for seeds. What you will probably need is vermiculite, which is this light fluffy substance. It's mined in various places in the world and used in horticulture. It's sterile, it's inorganic, and I use it to top my seeds with. It just keeps down mosses and stuff like that growing, and I suppose it keeps moisture in to a certain extent. But whenever I sow seeds, I top them with this, unless of course I top them with grit. When I make a mix for seeds, I like to put some sand into it. It's called horticultural sand, and it differs from building sand because it's pH neutral, and that might be very important for certain plants. And the other thing that you might need is horticultural grit, which is the same thing as the sand except it's bigger. So those are the pieces. And whenever I sow perennial seeds that are going to stay around for a long period of time, like primroses or aracema or anything like that, I will top them with the grit rather than the vermiculite that I talked about a little while ago. It's just more durable and lasts better, and these plants are going to be outside the greenhouse and they're going to be inside the greenhouse and they're going to be knocking around for a long period of time, and I just prefer grit for that rather than the vermiculite. You'll also need your composts, your base compost. You might mix it yourself. If you don't mix yourself, what you will need to find is a purpose seed compost. Now, seed compost needs to have no fertilizer in it. Seedlings don't need fertilizer, they just need water and light to germinate, and the fertilizer can actually do them harm. So it needs to have no fertilizer in it, and it needs to be sterile. And if you're not going to make your own mix, then I suggest you buy a purpose one. Now, the reason I make my own mix is twofold. Number one is that it's cheaper to mix your own, but number two is that when you make your own, you can make it peat free. Moss peat is partially decayed organic matter that's found in bogs and peatlands in solid form like this. Peat is non-renewable, and when it's broken down to this, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. Peat should be avoided for all our sakes, but unfortunately you'll need to look hard to find a mix that doesn't include this crumbly substrate that has a long history of horticultural use. So basically I try and steer away from peat products as much as is humanly possible, as we all do, I'm sure. So for this mix I'm using 2 parts non-peat based compost or potting mix and 1 part horticultural sand, just like the one that we saw here. Now, it doesn't matter what you use to measure out your composts with. I'm just using this kind of spade thing here, so it's a bit of an imprecise measurement. But the main thing is that you use the same thing for the compost as you do for the sand. And after a good mix, we're left with the fine crumbly substance like this, which is very good for seed sowing. You need something fine for your seeds. By the way, in Ireland or in the UK, we refer to any kind of mix for your plants that you buy in a bag as a compost, whereas I know in the States, compost means the decomposed matter that you might create in your garden in a compost heap. And we also refer to that as compost here, so that's just to confuse you. And of course, if you feel like really getting ahead of the game, why not fill up some of your trays already with the mix so that it will be ready for seed sowing in a few weeks' time. Well, that's clearly not enough. I need to make up the same again, but you get the idea. And clear some space for your seedlings. You don't want to have to do that at the last minute as well. So these dahlias are going out of the way, and I will now have a bit of space to put a few trays on. And what you should also do at this time is to buy seeds if you haven't ordered them already. Now, if you're anything like me, you've probably ordered your seeds months ago and you have them stored safely in your fridge. And this, of course, is the best way to sow seed. It's a metal tin, a small one, which sits in my fridge, not the freezer. The freezer doesn't work, but it's the safest way and the best way to just store seed going forward. A lot of seed in here that I collected in my own garden. They're in their individual packets, and a lot of stuff that I have bought and just can't wait to get sowing. But they're sitting in there and just waiting for me, so that's great. Now, because a lot of this seed is stuff I collected myself or stuff that perhaps I didn't get around to sowing last year, the question is it still viable? And the easiest way to check is to pre-germinate a few seeds from that batch. So you will take out 1 or 2 of the seeds and place them in a small egg cup of water in your kitchen indoors and just see if they sprout. If they sprout, then the rest of the batch is probably viable and you don't need to buy new. You can sow those when it's time to start sowing. You will also need to make some kind of plan for seed sowing. And here we have the information that came with a lot of the annuals I bought in autumn. And I love this company because they for each individual seed, they send you a whole little thing on how to sow and what to do and when to start and all that. So it's really, really useful. You can organise yourself in different ways. I like to keep everything on an Excel spreadsheet. I have all my seeds listed there, and when I sow things, I put them into a separate sheet. I have all my garden plants in there. But some people don't like that. A notebook is fine. And if you're really together and want to keep this information in your head in terms of seed sowing, then do so. But you'll need to make out some kind of plan. And this will be on the basis of what to sow first. So for example, these sheets here are in order of sowing, let's just say. So the hardy annuals, they will be the toughest ones that need the least heat. They are the ones I'll sow first. They will probably be followed by, let's see, what have we got here? By perennials, hardy perennials, and you've got your half hardy annuals too, and your tender perennials. And the tender perennials will be the ones that I sow last because they need the most heat. A lot of these will be started off in heat, but a lot of the annuals I would expect to start just here in the greenhouse when the temperatures warm up, and the ambient temperatures should be such that the little beauties just get going and reward me with little green shoots in a short period of time. So plan what you're going to sow, and that would go along the lines of, oh gosh, lots of things. We've got sunflowers in here, and there can be exceptions. So sunflowers are hardy annuals. You would think they could be sown next month, but in my experience, sunflowers are ones that should never be sown before April in the greenhouse, and there's a separate video on that somewhere if you are interested in that. So make a plan, Stan, and stick to it. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end of this video on what to do to prepare for seed sowing. I hope it has excited you a little bit. Maybe you weren't planning on sowing seeds. Maybe you're going to now because you know you don't want to be left behind, and you know you want that joy in your life too when you see those little shoots coming up and knowing everything that they're going to bring to your garden for the coming season. Thank you very much as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!